All right, in this short video, we're going to go over some criteria for finding credible resources online. So the first step is going over our objective. So you're going to be using today, you're going to determine the credibility of a website and whether it also is trustworthy, but you're going to use the PARC criteria. It'll be just a little bit of a structure that you can use not only this year and for this project, but also in the future throughout your whole life, really. I use it on a regular basis myself. And why should you care about this? Why is it important to you? First, evidence. We know that today, in the 21st century, that anybody can create a website and anybody can post anything on the internet. So it's really important now that we don't have those kind of external filters to determine whether that already actually go over and review evidence that's presented through books and magazines. They have their own editing process, but websites don't necessarily go through that. So it's important to go through this criteria to make sure that you're using the appropriate evidence, because if you spend hours and hours and hours researching and doing a project, but all your evidence is uncredible and untrustworthy, then you're not going to be able, then your whole project is essentially, you wasted a lot of your time because none of your evidence support your theories. The next thing, we've heard a lot about this. Sometimes it's used correctly in the news, sometimes it's not. But there is an issue with fake news out there. People, again, posting stories that they know are untrue in order to discredit people. And this is a major, major issue, not only in our country, but the whole world. But we saw really the impacts of it recently in our last big election, our presidential election. There was a lot of news being spread through Facebook and other social media sites that people really believed was true, because also, as we hear more and more throughout the news, there's analytic companies that look at your data and say, hey, if I write this fake news story about Bigfoot, Mr. Vaught really likes Bigfoot and he's going to believe this one, so I'm going to make sure it gets onto his Facebook page or his Twitter feed. So we have to be really aware that people will actually intentionally try to mislead us out there in the world, unfortunately. So we need to be armed with this criteria to evaluate our evidence and evaluate online resources. So define credibility. First, I want you guys to remember PARC. So currency actually already came up for some reason. So we're going to go backwards. So it's going to start with currency in that, and we're going to go over that. But that has to do with like when that website was born, so to speak, or updated. Reliability. How reliable is the information there? Does it jive with your own background information, or does it also connect to what you're hearing from other places? Also, the authority. So can we verify, one, who created this website? Number two, can we verify is this person an expert in that field? And is that person unbiased? And then point of view, and this has to do with the objectivity too. Do they have their own personal agenda? So we'll go over these criteria in a little more detail in the next few slides. So first, looking at point of view. And point of view, you need to look at what the site's domain is, so kind of where it lives. So if it ends in a .gov, that means that's short for government, and that's one of our US government sites. And usually those are pretty trustworthy. If you see .edu at the end of it, this stands for education, or it is usually used for higher education organizations like a college or a university. And .org is an organization. It's usually a nonprofit. And with that one, you do have to be careful, because nonprofits do usually have their own agenda. And so some of the information might be objective, but they only might present the information or the evidence that supports their side of it. So you're going to have to balance it by looking at the other side of the issue, or for more objective sites. If you see .com, means commercial, that's the one that anybody can build. And if you see .net, that's a network, and that's like a group of .coms all kind of working together. So if you see either one of those, it doesn't mean you can't trust it, but it means that you need to be a little bit more suspicious. Also, you need to look at the point of view and the perspective of the site. What is it trying to do? Is it trying to just simply inform you, or is it trying to persuade you to believe a certain way? Next, you got to look at authority. And authority means that what makes that author an expert, and can you find the author? If you can't find the author on a website, or if it's kind of hidden from you and it's hard to find, then that should actually send up a red flag for you, because most of us, especially when we're proud of our work, we want to take credit for it. So if you don't see that the author apparent right there in the first page on a website, then be kind of suspicious. But also look at his or her credentials. I could make a website on the saving the humpback whale and why they're so necessary to the ocean's ecosystem. But I'm not an expert in that field. I have an English degree, and also a degree in psychology, and I'm a teacher. So I could talk on those subjects with as an expert, but on that subject, on the humpback whales, I couldn't. Next, and I've already kind of touched on this, you need to really be sure that the author is an expert in the subject area. And then also, is there a way on the website to contact the author or get his or her contact information? At the very least, there's usually a way to email the author. Test this out. Sometimes you'll see the way to email them, but when you go to it, it doesn't take you anywhere. It tells you that it's broken. If that's the case, again, be very, very suspicious. Next, reliability. This next one is a big one to determine if a website's reliable. Is it free of spelling and grammar mistakes? If it's not, then that tells you a couple of things. One, they might not be very educated, or they might actually, what we had in a lot of the fake news with the election, when you looked at those fake news sites, they are filled with grammar and spelling mistakes, because a lot of those fake news stories originated in Russia or the Ukraine. So they weren't native English speakers, so they made a lot of spelling and grammar mistakes in English. The second thing that this will tell you is that the person maybe doesn't really value this website or value the information, because they haven't gone through the simple step of using spell check and grammar check in it, which is incredibly easy to use, even if they're too lazy to actually proofread it themselves. Next, you need to look at, is it based on facts? So can you determine it if it's true by checking another reliable source, or can you determine if it's true based upon your observation? Like, I can walk outside and see some green grass and say that's green, and that's a fact because I can observe it with my own eyes. And this is another big one. Does it match your own background information? This could be background information that you've already come in with, or it could be background information that you're building from other websites. Maybe at website A says one thing about a subject, but website B says something very, very different about that. So those two pieces of information, they're not connected and they're not kind of jiving for you. They're not matching up. So what you need to do then is actually check a third resource and determine which of those two is true. And it could be that neither one of them match, and you might want to just toss all three of those sites and start over. And also, this is another big one. Is it easy to navigate? So can you get around this website easily? If it's confusing, if it's hard to get around, it might not be reliable, but also don't waste your time with it. If you do any sort of Google search on any topic, you're going to come up with like millions and thousands, or at least thousands of websites to look at. So don't waste your time with one that's kind of confusing. Next, do the links to the other sites work? So do they, so when you click on those links, do they actually take you to other sites? And do they take you to other sites that are based on facts? So that's another huge one. If you go to, say, a Holocaust site, and you click on a link to that one, and it takes you to actually a neo-Nazi site or a white supremacy site, and that site, the original one that you went to that neo-Nazi site from, you don't want to use, because you can tell right there that it's a very biased and it's probably not going to be telling you the truth. And last, currency. This is a big one. Currency has to do when it was either created or updated. So kind of look at it, was it created or updated in the last year? You can usually find this at the very, very, very bottom of the page. But don't be confused with postings. So if there's like a blog post on it that is automatically updated, that doesn't mean that original site was updated in the last year. It just means that it has this automated feed to actually put blog posts from another site or a news feed from another site that gets updated automatically. But computers nowadays, they can do that without the actual creator of the website being involved at all. So right now, we've gone through this. Remember to go back and rewatch if anything went a little too fast for you. But what you're going to do now is actually you're going to look at these 3 websites. So you can type them in straight into your URL, and you're going to use the link down here to get to a Google Doc that actually has all these criteria. And all you simply have to do is go through each one of these websites, determine yes or no to each of the focus questions that follow the PARCC criteria, and determine which of these websites is true. To give you a hint, 2 are fake, 1 is actually true. So, and tomorrow morning when you come into class, we'll actually be going over this together and actually then utilizing these new this new PARCC criteria to actually do research for your research report that you have looming on the horizon, and you need to start to collect research for, or collect evidence for. All right, thank you very much, and good luck with all this, and enjoy using those PARCC criteria to evaluate these 3 websites.